So I was born with a condition in my right leg that caused some issues with circulation. And it's a very long story. It's kind of a medical model story, and a lot of times we talk about what model we're using when we're talking about disability, and the medical model is unfortunately the one that can be most harming to people with disabilities. But my story was always a medical story to me. That was the story I was told. It was a medical story. But anyhow, so I was born with this condition that resulted in lack of circulation, so atrophy to my bones, muscle weakening. I had 9 major surgeries growing up, and by the time I was 22, my doctors recommended that I have my leg amputated. So I have lived with a disability my entire life. It has evolved and changed as I've grown up and gotten older. I've been now above knee amputee using a prosthesis for 26 years. But the why starts when I was a young child, and there was no one in my life that was living with a visible physical disability. So no one in my family, no one in my school. It was, as a young person, a very lonely existence. And I tell this story all the time because I can remember it so deeply. When I was in 6th grade, I was in a school that had 2 floors, and I had had a surgery that made it so that I used a wheelchair for a couple years, and so I wasn't able to go to the 2nd floor. And also, our cafeteria was down a couple steps. So it was a building that was inaccessible. It was a very small school, and this was, in the 80s. And the solution at the time for my teachers and for the school was, at the times when I was unable to go to my classes upstairs, or during lunch and recess, because the steps made it a barrier for me to be able to go to those spaces and to be with my peers, the solution was putting me in the main office. So I sat in the main office with a wonderful receptionist for 3 of my classes and for lunch and recess. And I ate my lunch sitting at a desk with the receptionist. And it was lonely. I was excluded. I was excluded from being with my peers. And I mean, I can still bring up that feeling of exclusion and how devastating it was to a 12-year-old. And at the time, I thought, okay, well, this is the solution that they've come up with. I can't get up the steps, so what else are they going to do except just leave me here by myself? And there's a lot more in terms of the progression of my life and living with my disability, but that is at the heart and the soul of why I do the work I do right now, is that feeling of not being included that resulted in a lot of emotional and mental trauma for me growing up that just made me feel like I wasn't important, I wasn't valued, I wasn't a part of a group at all. I didn't belong anywhere, and I don't want that feeling for anybody. That is such a raw, terrible, hurtful feeling. What I processed at that age was that I was abnormal, and that was a bad thing. That's what I processed, because as I mentioned, I had several corrective surgeries, and doctors and my parents and family, friends, people who supported me, all who thought, and they were doing the best that they could. The reason that was happening for a child, the way they explained it to me was, we want you to live a normal life. Which to me meant, well, the life I'm living is not normal. And as a child, normal is good, and what I'm living must not be right and good. And so there's a lot of emotional stuff that I had to process through as an adult, and thankfully now I can process through it. But interestingly, I have reached out and I've gone to counseling. I've gone to 3 different counselors, none of whom had ever done any work with a person with a disability. And I looked, and I'm sure that they are out there. But in a time of desperation, and I sit in front of someone and I say, have you ever done therapy with someone who is a person with a disability? And all 3 of them, no. And not that I needed someone who had that experience, but it would have been helpful because I just had to unpack all of that. I just think the resources for people with disabilities are not as easy to find as as one might think. But yeah, at the time, as a child, that's how I processed it. That this is normal, and this is good, and we're trying to make you normal, which means that whatever is happening with you is not normal and not good and wrong. So a lot of my own emotional and mental and spiritual work has been regaining my own power and my voice.